Here in the NBC4i Streaming Center, joined by Kevin with CASA, Franklin County. And we had such a great response. We talked about adoption and everything that went along with that all throughout the month of May, and foster care and different things like that. But another element to helping children in our community is becoming a CASA. And Mrs. Houston, Lieutenant Governor's wife, talked about her passion for that in an interview that we did here in the Streaming Center last week. So I wanted to bring on CASA and a representative from CASA and talk about how you become a CASA and who is a right fit to become one.
Thank you for the opportunity, Christine. We're glad to be here today.
No problem. Kevin, can you tell us a little bit more about that process and if it's kind of on people's minds or hearts right now, what does that process look like and who's a good fit to become a CASA in Franklin County?
Sure. CASA is actually an acronym for Court-Appointed Special Advocates. And the CASA movement began in Seattle in the late 1970s when a judge was really concerned that he wasn't getting all of the information regarding children who had suffered abuse and neglect and then went into the foster care system. And so he started recruiting volunteers to be trained and then serve as guardians ad litem for these children and report back to the court. And when the judge initially did this, he thought, oh, we'll get 3 or 4 people. And he had something like 15. So he knew there was that need and that openness in people's hearts. CASA came here to Franklin County in 1991, so we're in our 31st year. We're currently a department of under the Office of Justice Policy and Programs for the Franklin County Board of Commissioners. And what we do is train community volunteers. We train them in about a 40-hour process. Some of it is online, some of it is hybrid. And once they've completed that training, they are sworn in as officers of the court, and they then go out and provide advocacy for children who are in the Franklin County court system who have suffered abuse and neglect. And they go back to the court with regular reports. Our volunteers see children at least once every month. Because they're officers of the court, they have access to all kinds of records. They are able to get medical records, school records, whatever they need to go back to the court and recommend what is in the best interest of that child. Last year, even with the pandemic, coming and going throughout the year, we served 682 children, and currently we have 335 CASA volunteers here in Franklin County. Who can be a CASA? We say anyone who has an open heart. We provide all of the training free of charge. We provide support with our staff of case managers and attorneys. And anyone who's 21 years of age or older is eligible to apply and to undergo the training. Of course, because we're working with children, there are extensive background checks. We want to make sure that we are providing a safe and secure and above all consistent presence for these children. So we have folks from every range of life. We have moms with young children who are looking to do something for the community. We have dads who coach baseball and football throughout the year and want to provide a consistent presence for young men in the system. We have retired teachers, retired nurses. We're very, very fortunate with the community response here in Franklin County. So we're happy to work with anyone and provide them with the resources they need to help these kids.
And why is it so important that these kids do get the advocacy, do get the help that they need? Obviously, being in the foster care system is extremely hard, extremely taxing, can be traumatic, being removed from your home and not having your parents there. Can you just elaborate a little bit more on the importance of the advocacy that these kids need?
Well, you really hit the nail on the head, Christine, because it is a very traumatic experience. Children often are moved out of the home very suddenly. They are often moved in foster placements, unfortunately, from one to the next. That all leaves a mark on that child. Caseworkers change with child welfare agencies. Sometimes attorneys change. And we have found that the number one reason for resiliency, or source for resiliency with a child, is to have a consistent adult presence. And that's what we try and do at CASA. No matter what else changes, our volunteer is there for that child to get him or her what they need to get through that case. Right now, the average case lasts around 24 months. And so when we interview volunteers, we explain to them, we're really asking them to make at least a 2-year commitment so that they can stick with those kids throughout. And I have to share with you too, a lot of times, most of the time, we get the more severe cases of abuse and neglect. In Ohio, any child who has suffered abuse and neglect and is in the system is required to have a guardian ad litem. Now, the court can either appoint a private attorney to serve in that capacity, or they can appoint one of our volunteers. And because private attorneys, that's their living, and they have multiple cases to deal with, the court oftentimes will just assign one of our CASA volunteers, who usually has 1, maybe 2 cases, to work with those children who've had the most severe abuse, or might be in multiple siblings in multiple locations, because in those situations, those kids need real specific and sort of intensive care to make sure that their needs are being met.
Can you give some tangible examples of the work that you would do in the court system for those who may not have ever been to court a day in their life? What does this work do, and what exactly does the guardian ad litem do for their specific child?
Absolutely. It's not quite what we see on TV. There are a lot of times when cases are continued, meaning that there's no decision handed down that day and more information is needed. And so another hearing is scheduled. But when we talk about the role of the CASA, generally in a hearing involving an abused or neglected child, you'll have representatives from child welfare. You may have representatives from the family, the natural family, biological family. And then you'll have, in our case, the CASA, GAL. And the court, the magistrate usually, or the judge, will listen to the various points of view from those different parties, but they're all taken to be considered equally. So our CASA volunteer has as much input and as much weight behind their recommendation as does child welfare and as do family attorneys. And basically, while we don't make direct referrals to services, if we know that a child is in need of food, if we know a child is not being cared for medically, oftentimes many abused and neglected children will have learning difficulties. And so we want to make sure that they have an individual education plan, or IEP. We make sure that that is heard by the court and those needs are met. So it really is speaking up, standing up for children who oftentimes are voiceless in this system, and sharing with the court what is in the best interest of that kiddo.
Now, you said there's about a 40-hour training program. After you would get through that, for people who would like to sign up, what is the time commitment? Is there a financial commitment when you do commit to the 2-year process, essentially, after that?
Sure.
About roughly per week or month, would you say?
Sure. There's no financial commitment. We cover all of the expenses of their training. We cover mileage when they travel, anything like that. The time is the biggest commitment. Anytime a case opens, you can imagine there's a lot of fact finding to be done. There's a lot of interviewing. There's a lot of case review. that's the most time-consuming part of the case. After that, we're probably averaging somewhere between 10 and 14 hours a month. And a lot of that is, visiting with the child, checking on their progress, and just making sure that he or she has what they need.
Um, Whenever I was talking to the Husteds, Mrs. Husted kind of brought up that this is a really good tool for people who perhaps have foster care on their hearts but can't commit to bringing somebody into their home. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Absolutely. Our advocates are as passionate and as committed and as caring as anyone can imagine in working with these children. And it is difficult to be a foster parent, but this has the same kind of love for children and appreciation for their dignity and appreciation for their well-being. And so if you think about foster care, but find that it's overwhelming or not possible for you, this really is a great alternative.
All right, Kevin, I don't think I have any more questions for you, other than where can people go to learn more information and sign up?
Absolutely. They can actually apply online at casa.franklincountyohio.gov. And we have another class starting in mid-July. We have a series of pre-service interviews before classes start. So if anyone is interested, we hope that they'll reach out to us at casa.franklincountyohio.gov.
All right, Kevin, thank you so much. Anything else that you would like to add that I may not have asked you?
No, I think that covers it. We just really appreciate the opportunity, Christine.
Yeah, of course. All right, guys, all that information that Kevin just said will be linked in the article below. And you can check that out on NBC4i.com if you are watching this elsewhere, like on YouTube or something like that. Thank you so much for your time today, Kevin.
Thank you, Christine.